Left with no shelter, cast out and hut burned, an Apache woman fought back with the rancher's help. The sun rose slowly over the dusty hills, painting the world in soft shades of orange and gold. Birds chirped in the trees, and the wind whispered through the tall grass. On the edge of a small settlement, a young Apache woman named Nina stirred in her small, humble hut. She lived there alone, her family having passed away some years before. Despite the hardships she had faced, Nina carried herself with quiet strength and dignity. Her eyes were sharp, and her hands were skilled, capable of weaving baskets, making simple clothes, and gathering herbs from the land. Her home was small, made of wood and straw, but it had been a place of safety for her, a place where she could rest and feel some comfort in a world that often seemed cruel. Nina had always been careful about her movements and choices. She knew the settlers in the nearby town watched her closely, and she had learned to avoid trouble. Every morning she would rise with the sun, light a small fire for cooking, and step outside to tend to the small garden she had nurtured. Tomatoes, corn, and beans grew there, thriving under her gentle care. The garden was more than food. It was a symbol of her independence. Nina knew that with her skills and determination, she could survive on her own, even in a place where she was often viewed with suspicion. But that morning, the usual quiet of her life was broken by a strange feeling. A shadow passed over her hut, and a sudden chill ran down her spine. Nina paused, listening carefully. In the distance she heard voices, sharp and hurried, growing closer. Her heart began to race, though she tried to keep calm. She stepped outside and looked around, but the fields were empty. Only the wind moved through the trees. Something in the air felt wrong, and Nina could not shake the feeling that trouble was near. By mid-morning the feeling became a reality. A group of townspeople had gathered near her hut. She recognized some of them. Men and women who had always treated her with cold suspicion. They did not speak kindly, and their eyes carried judgment rather than understanding. Nina watched them from a distance, staying calm, hoping they would leave. She did not want conflict. She had learned long ago that survival often meant patience and discretion. But as she watched, she saw that they were moving closer, carrying sticks and bundles of something. Panic rose in her chest. She realized her home, the one place she felt safe, might no longer be hers. Nina's mind raced. She had nowhere else to go. She had no family nearby, no friends in the town she could trust completely. She had always relied on herself, on her knowledge of the land and her skill in taking care of herself. But the thought of losing her home was unbearable. Every corner of the hut, every piece of straw and wood held memories. Even the smallest things, a basket she had woven, a pot she had saved for years, were precious. And now, they were in danger. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "Please," she called, "I do not wish to fight. My home is small, but it is mine. Let me live in peace." The townspeople ignored her words. They moved closer, speaking among themselves, their voices low and harsh. Nina could see anger and fear in their eyes. She understood that their hostility did not come from her directly. It came from suspicion, from old tensions between her people and the settlers. But that did not make it easier to face them. She felt a deep ache in her chest, a mix of fear, sadness, and frustration. As the group approached, Nina realized she had no choice. She could not stay and defend her hut. She would be outnumbered. Instead, she did the only thing she could. She gathered what few belongings she could carry. She placed her woven baskets carefully in a cloth, tied her small bundle of herbs, and prepared to leave the only home she had ever known. Her heart hurt with every step. She wanted to cry, but she held back her tears, knowing that she needed her strength more than her sorrow. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the land as Nina stepped away from her hut. She glanced back one last time. Smoke curled from the roof, a cruel reminder that her home had been taken from her. She felt anger, yes, but also determination. She would not give up. Though the world seemed unfair, she knew she had skills, courage, and intelligence that could help her survive. She would find a way to rebuild, even if it took years. Nina began walking toward the outskirts of the town, keeping to the edges of the trees and hills where she could stay hidden. She avoided the main road, knowing that any passerby might view her with suspicion. Her stomach growled, but she pushed the hunger aside. Finding food was not easy, but Nina had survived worse days before. She remembered the wild berries she had seen along the trail, the edible roots she had once used when her garden was small and failing. Slowly, methodically, she collected what she could, preparing for a night under the open sky. As evening approached, Nina found a small clearing near a stream. She sat down, tired but alert, and began to make a simple fire. The flickering flames brought warmth and a sense of security, even in the middle of the unknown. She roasted a few of the berries and roots, eating slowly, savoring the little sustenance she had. As night fell, she wrapped herself in a blanket she had carried and leaned against a tree, gazing at the stars. The sky was vast, and for a moment she felt small and vulnerable. But then she remembered her mother's words. Strength is not in hiding, but in rising again when the world tries to push you down. Nina thought about her future. She knew she could not return to her old hut. It had been destroyed, her home no longer safe. But she also knew she could not give up. She had lived through loss before, had endured loneliness and hardship, and had always found a way forward. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet of the night soothe her. Tomorrow she would move again, searching for safety and a chance to rebuild. Hours passed, and the night grew colder. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying distant sounds of the town she had left behind. She felt a mix of fear and resolve. The world could be cruel, but Nina knew that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the choice to face each day, no matter how difficult, and to keep moving forward. She wrapped herself tighter in her blanket and slept lightly, ready to rise with the sun. By dawn, Nina was already awake. Her body ached from sleeping on the ground, but her spirit was unbroken. She began walking again, staying careful to avoid paths where she might be seen. The land was harsh, but it was familiar. She remembered the streams, the small groves, the places where food and water could be found. She had survived worse storms and hunger, and she would survive this as well. As the sun climbed higher, Nina spotted a small ridge that could serve as shelter from the town's watchful eyes. She climbed it, scanning the surrounding area. There, in the distance, she saw open land, empty and waiting. It was far from home, but it offered the possibility of safety and a new beginning. She felt a spark of hope. Though her hut was gone, her courage remained. And with courage, she knew she could find a way to rebuild, step by step, day by day. Nina's journey had begun, though she was left with nothing. She carried her strength, her skills, and her determination with her. She was alone, yes, but she was not defeated. Every step she took was a promise to herself. She would survive. She would endure, and one day she would have a home again. A home she could call truly hers. And so, as the sun rose over the hills, Nina walked forward, her heart heavy but her spirit alive. The world had cast her out, but she was not lost. She was an Apache woman, strong, wise, and brave, and nothing, not fire, not fear, not loneliness, could take that from her. Nina walked through the hills and valleys, her feet weary but her spirit steady. The morning sun bathed the land in a soft golden light. Birds flew across the sky, and the wind carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. She moved quietly, keeping to the edges of the trees where she could stay hidden from the town below. Every step reminded her of how far she had come, leaving her home behind and stepping into the unknown. She had been walking for hours when she noticed smoke rising in the distance. Her heart quickened, not with fear, but curiosity. She wondered if it came from a campfire or a small settlement. Carefully she approached, keeping low and moving slowly so no one would see her. As she came closer, she saw a small ranch, with wooden fences and grazing animals. A man was working in the field tending to the cattle. He looked strong and confident, moving with the ease of someone who understood the land completely. Nina stopped behind a tree watching him. She did not know who he was, but something about him seemed kind. He did not look at her suspiciously, and he moved with a calm assurance. Nina stayed hidden, unsure if she should approach. She had learned to be careful around settlers. Trust had to be earned, but her hunger and exhaustion pushed her forward. She needed food, water, and a safe place to rest, even for a short time. Gathering her courage, she stepped closer, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Excuse me," she said softly. The man looked up, surprised, but his expression quickly softened when he saw her weary face and careful posture. "Hello," he replied. "Are you lost?" Nina nodded. I need help," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed the exhaustion and fear she had carried for days. "I have nowhere to go. I have been cast out, and my home, it is gone." The man's eyes softened further. "I am Tom," he said. "I have a small ranch here. You are welcome to rest, at least for a little while." Nina hesitated. She did not know this man, and she had been taught to be careful. But something in his tone felt genuine. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said. Tom led her to a small cabin on the ranch, not far from the main fields. It was simple but well kept, with a roof of wooden shingles and a warm fire burning inside. He gave her water and bread, and she sat down, letting her tired body relax for the first time in days. The warmth of the fire and the smell of cooked bread made her feel safe, something she had not felt since her hut had been destroyed. As Nina ate, she told Tom a little about herself. She spoke of her life in the hills, of her garden and her small hut, and of the fire that had taken everything from her. She did not hide her sadness or her fear. Tom listened quietly, nodding and asking gentle questions. He did not judge her, and he did not rush her. He simply listened, giving her the gift of understanding. "You are very brave," he said when she finished her story. "Many people would have given up by now. You have survived so much already." Nina looked down at her hands. She did not feel brave, only tired and lonely. "I do not know if I am brave," she said softly. "I only know I have to keep going." Tom smiled kindly. "That is bravery," he said. "Not giving up, even when the world seems against you. I respect that." For the next few days, Nina stayed on the ranch. Tom gave her work to do, helping with small chores, feeding the animals, gathering firewood. It was hard work, but it gave her a sense of purpose. For the first time since losing her home, she felt like she could breathe, like she could plan for the future rather than just survive day by day. During this time, Nina and Tom learned from each other. She taught him how to gather edible plants, how to recognize herbs that could be used for medicine, and how to find water in hidden places. In return, Tom showed her how to care for the animals, mend fences, and handle the tools on the ranch. They worked side by side, their efforts creating a quiet bond built on respect and trust. One afternoon, as they worked together in the fields, Tom spoke carefully. "I know some people in town will not understand why I am helping you," he said. "They may not like it if they see you here." Nina paused, looking at him. "I do not want trouble for you," she said. "I only want to survive and live in peace." Tom shook his head. "You deserve peace," he said firmly, "and I cannot let fear or judgment stop me from helping someone who needs it. You have courage, and you have skill. That matters more than what others think." Nina felt a warmth in her heart. For so long she had been alone, struggling against the world. To have someone stand beside her, someone who saw her as a person and not a problem, was a new experience. She felt a small spark of hope that perhaps, after all the loss, life could still offer kindness. As days turned into weeks, Nina began to regain strength. She explored the hills around the ranch, finding small streams and hidden groves where she could gather berries and herbs. She found a small, quiet place near the edge of the property where she could rest in solitude. Though she had lost her old home, she was beginning to see that this place, with its fields, animals, and safety, could be a beginning for something new. At night, Nina and Tom would sit by the fire, talking about the land, the seasons, and their lives. She shared stories of her people, their traditions, and the ways they lived in harmony with nature. Tom listened with interest and respect, asking questions and learning from her knowledge. In return, he shared stories of his own life, the challenges of running a ranch, and the joys of caring for animals. Slowly, a friendship grew between them, one built on understanding, trust, and a shared respect for hard work and courage. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Nina looked out over the fields. The sky was painted with orange and pink, and the air was calm and warm. She thought of her hut, of the life she had lost, and felt a pang of sorrow. But she also felt something new, hope. She realized that even though she had been cast out, she was not alone. She had found someone willing to help, someone who believed in her strength. Tom noticed her quiet reflection and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You have come a long way," he said, "and I believe you will go even further. This is only the beginning." Nina nodded, feeling a sense of determination she had not felt in weeks. She knew there would be challenges ahead. She could not forget the hostility of some townspeople, and she could not ignore the possibility of danger. But for the first time, she felt that she had a chance. She was not just surviving anymore. She was learning to live again, to plan, and to hope. In the days that followed, Nina and Tom worked together to make small improvements around the ranch. They repaired fences, cleared brush, and strengthened the small cabin. Nina began to feel a sense of pride in her work, knowing that her skills and determination were helping to create something lasting. Tom admired her resilience and the way she never gave up, even in the face of adversity. As spring turned to summer, Nina's confidence grew. She started to dream about rebuilding a small home of her own, somewhere safe and quiet, where she could live with dignity. She did not yet know how she would achieve this, but she knew that with her skills, courage, and the support of her new friend, it was possible. Nina also began to notice subtle changes in the nearby town. Some settlers who had once looked at her with suspicion began to speak less harshly when they saw her working alongside Tom. Though not all were welcoming, she could sense that her presence, combined with Tom's respect for her, was slowly changing minds. It was a small but meaningful sign that perhaps the world could recognize her worth, even if it had taken so long. One evening, after a long day of work, Nina sat quietly by the fire, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had lost everything: her home, her safety, her sense of belonging. Yet she had found something unexpected: kindness, trust, and the possibility of a new life. She realized that courage was not only about facing danger, it was also about embracing hope when it seemed impossible. As the stars appeared in the sky, Nina made a quiet promise to herself. She would rebuild, not just a home, but a life filled with dignity, respect, and strength. She would honor her past and the people she had lost, while moving forward into a future she would shape with her own hands. And though the road ahead would not be easy, she knew she would not face it alone. With Tom's help, her knowledge, and her courage, Nina began to see that life could offer a second chance. She had been cast out, yes, but she had also been given an opportunity to rise again, stronger and wiser than before. And with that thought, she closed her eyes, feeling a quiet peace settle over her, a peace born from trust, friendship, and the promise of a new beginning. Days passed, and Nina began to feel stronger, more confident, and more in control of her life. Living on Tom's ranch had given her not only safety, but also the time to think about the future. She no longer felt like a wanderer with nothing but fear and sorrow. Instead, she started to imagine what she could do next, how she could rebuild a home of her own and create a life she could truly call hers. One morning, as the sunlight filtered through the trees, Nina walked with Tom along the edge of the ranch. They were checking the fences, making sure the cattle were safe. Nina carried a small notebook she had begun to keep, writing down ideas for her new home and sketches of simple structures she could build. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. "Maybe I can rebuild somewhere near the creek over there. It's hidden from the road, and the soil is good for growing food. It could be safe." Tom looked where she was pointing. "That could work," he said. "It's far enough from the town that people won't notice, but close enough that you'll have water and can grow things. We'll need to plan carefully, though. Safety comes first." Nina nodded. Planning was something she excelled at. She had survived before because she had always been careful and observant. Now, with Tom's guidance, she could take those skills to the next level. They spent the rest of the morning walking along the land, observing the terrain, noting where animals grazed, where water collected, and where the sun hit strongest for growing crops. "You think too much like a survivor," Tom said with a smile. "I admire that. Most people just see land. You see possibilities." Nina smiled back. "I have to see possibilities," she said. "If I do not, I will only survive. I want more than that. I want to live." By noon, they had mapped out the area where Nina could build a small hut. It would not be large, but it would be safe and hidden. She could grow food, gather water, and even have a small place for herbs and plants she could use for medicine. Tom promised to help with some of the heavy work, but Nina insisted she wanted to do most of it herself. This was her home, her life, and she wanted it to reflect her effort and determination. Over the next few days, Nina began collecting materials. She gathered sturdy branches from fallen trees, long grasses for weaving, and stones to create a foundation. Tom helped when needed, showing her how to stack stones securely and how to make a simple frame strong enough to support a roof. Nina's hands worked with skill and precision. Each piece she added to the foundation felt like a small victory, proof that she was not defeated, proof that she could create something lasting from the ruins of her old life. One afternoon, as Nina was working, she paused and looked around. The hills stretched out before her, quiet and peaceful. The sound of the creek nearby was soothing, and the smell of fresh grass filled the air. She realized how far she had come, from being cast out and homeless, to having a plan, a safe place, and even an ally who believed in her. It was not the life she had dreamed of, but it was a life she could build, and for the first time she felt hope without fear shadowing it. Tom approached, carrying a bundle of tools. "I think we can finish the foundation tomorrow," he said. "Then we can start on the walls. You're doing all the hard work, but I want to be here for you. It's easier when you have someone helping, even if it's just carrying a few things." Nina nodded. "Thank you, Tom," she said. "I do not want to rely on you too much, but it feels good to have help sometimes." Tom smiled. "That's what friends are for," he said. As they worked together, Nina realized how much she had learned from Tom. He was patient and practical, and he knew the land in ways that she did not. He taught her how to secure the hut against wind, how to dig a shallow trench to direct rainwater away, and how to make a simple but effective door. Nina absorbed everything, combining her knowledge of nature with his practical skills. At night, after long days of work, they would sit by the fire, discussing what to do next. Nina talked about planting a small garden, collecting herbs, and even creating a small fence to keep animals safe. Tom offered advice and encouragement, reminding her that each step forward, no matter how small, was important. One evening, Nina spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I never thought I would feel this safe again," she said. "After everything that happened, I thought I would always be afraid, always running. But now I see that I can create a life that is mine, even if it takes time." Tom nodded. "It will take time," he said, "but you have the strength for it. You've already shown that." Nina smiled, feeling a sense of pride. She knew it would not be easy. Some townspeople might still watch her, still judge her, and there was always the possibility of new challenges. But she had learned that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was moving forward, step by step, even when the path was uncertain. The following week, Nina and Tom began to build the walls of her new hut. Using the branches she had gathered and long strips of woven grass, they created a simple but strong structure. Each day, Nina worked from sunrise to sunset, her muscles aching but her heart full. She worked methodically, ensuring every branch was secure, every layer of grass tightly woven. Tom helped lift heavy pieces, but he let Nina take the lead. This was her project, her life, and he respected that. As the hut began to take shape, Nina felt a sense of accomplishment. She could see the outline of a home rising from the ground, a place where she could feel safe and start anew. It was small, but it was sturdy, and it was hers. For the first time since losing her old hut, she could imagine sitting inside, cooking her meals, and sleeping without fear. During breaks, Nina would walk around the surrounding hills, collecting more materials and observing the land. She noticed wild berries growing near the creek, roots that could be used for food, and herbs with medicinal properties. She began to plan her garden, imagining rows of vegetables and a small patch for herbs. Each discovery added to her confidence, reinforcing her belief that she could survive and thrive on her own land. One afternoon, as Nina worked, she noticed a group of settlers passing by in the distance. They did not approach, but she could feel their eyes on the land. Her heart tightened for a moment, but she reminded herself to stay calm. She had come too far to be frightened now. She continued working, steady and focused, letting her determination shine through. Tom noticed her tension and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do not worry about them," he said. "You are doing nothing wrong. You have every right to build your home here. Keep going." Nina nodded, feeling gratitude for his support. With Tom by her side, she felt she could face anything. The work was hard, the days long, and the challenges many, but she was no longer alone. She had a plan, she had an ally, and she had the courage to keep moving forward. By the end of the week, the hut was nearly complete. The walls stood tall, the roof was in place, and the doorway framed the view of the hills beyond. Nina stepped back to look at her creation, her heart swelling with pride. She had built something from nothing, turning fear and loss into determination and hope. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Nina sat by the small fire she had built outside the hut. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the day her old home was burned, to the long nights under the open sky, to the days of hard work and planning. She realized that each step, each challenge, had taught her something valuable. She had learned patience, resilience, and the power of trust. Tom joined her, bringing a small pot of tea. "You should be proud," he said. "You have done something remarkable." Nina smiled, feeling warmth not only from the fire, but from the sense of achievement. "I could not have done it without you," she said softly. Tom shook his head. "No," he said. "You did this. I only helped. You have the strength, the knowledge, and the courage. This is your home." Nina nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly safe. She knew there would still be challenges ahead. There always were, but she also knew that she could face them. She had proven to herself that she was capable, strong, and resilient. As the night grew quiet, Nina made a promise to herself. She would continue to build, to learn, and to grow. She would create a life of dignity and strength, honoring her past while shaping her future. And though the road ahead would not be easy, she knew she could face it with courage, determination, and the support of a friend who believed in her. Nina had come a long way from being cast out, left with nothing and facing fear and uncertainty. She had started with only hope and courage, and now she had a plan, a safe place, and the tools to rebuild her life. She understood that the journey was not over, but she was ready to continue, step by step, building a life she could be proud of. And as the stars shone above, casting a gentle light over the hills, Nina felt a quiet joy. She had survived the worst, and now, with determination, skill, and trust, she was creating something beautiful from the ashes of her past. The sun rose slowly over the hills, casting long shadows across Nina's new hut. The structure had taken shape beautifully, and she felt a quiet pride as she walked around it, inspecting each wall and the roof. Her hands were sore from the work, but her heart was light. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she had a place to call her own, a small sanctuary where she could live without fear. Yet, as she stood by the doorway, looking at the surrounding hills, a thought crept into her mind. The town was not far, and some people had already shown suspicion when she had begun her work. What if they decided she did not belong there, even now? What if they tried to drive her away again? The fear that had been a constant companion for so long returned, sharp and insistent. Nina shook her head, refusing to let fear control her. She had come too far to turn back now. She had survived before, and she would survive again. With a deep breath, she turned to continue her work, sweeping the ground around the hut and arranging stones to form a small path leading to the creek. Each stone she placed felt like a step toward safety, a step toward reclaiming her life. As she worked, she noticed a small group of townspeople moving in the distance. They were far enough away not to cause immediate concern, but close enough that she could see them clearly. Some of them looked curious, while others seemed to be whispering to one another. Nina's heart tightened for a moment, but she reminded herself to stay calm. She had learned patience and observation during the days she had wandered alone, and now those skills were her greatest allies. Tom arrived, carrying a basket of food. "Good morning," he said, smiling. "You've done a lot already." "I thought we could take a break before they notice anything." Nina nodded, grateful for the distraction. They sat under a tree near the creek, eating bread, cheese, and fresh berries Nina had gathered. As they ate, she explained what she had seen. Tom listened carefully, nodding. "We will not let them intimidate you," he said firmly.
"You have every right to build your home here. If anyone tries to stop you, we will face them together."
"You are not alone." Nina felt a warmth spread through her chest. His words were more than encouragement. They were a promise. For the first time, she did not feel entirely on her own. She had an ally, someone who believed in her strength and her right to live in peace. The next few days were tense. Nina and Tom continued their work on the hut, strengthening the walls, adding small windows, and improving the roof. Yet the presence of the townspeople lingered in the back of Nina's mind. She worked carefully, making sure everything was sturdy and secure, knowing that she could not rely on luck alone. One afternoon, as Nina carried a bundle of sticks, a group of 3 settlers approached. They did not speak at first, simply standing near the edge of the property and watching her work. Nina froze for a moment, her heart pounding. But then she remembered Tom's words. Courage was moving forward, even when the path was uncertain. She continued her work, carrying the sticks to the hut, her movements steady and calm. Finally, one of the men spoke. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice sharp. "You're not supposed to be building on this land." Nina set down the sticks and faced them. "I have the right to be here," she said calmly. "This land is safe for me, and I mean no harm. I am only trying to live in peace." The men exchanged glances. One stepped forward.
"We don't trust you," he said. "You're not from here."
"You don't belong." Nina's eyes met his, steady and unwavering.
"I do belong," she said. "I have worked hard to build this place."
"I have done nothing to harm anyone. I only want to live in peace." At that moment, Tom stepped out from behind the hut. "She is right," he said firmly. "This land is safe for her, and she has every right to build her home here. If you have a problem with that, you will have to speak to me." The settlers looked at him, surprised by his confidence. Tom was respected in the town as a rancher, and his presence changed the balance of the confrontation. "We are not trying to fight," he continued. "We only want peace. But you will not intimidate her. She has worked hard, and she deserves to live here safely." The men hesitated, sensing that their hostility was no longer going to be effective. After a moment, they muttered among themselves and slowly walked away, leaving Nina and Tom alone. Nina's heart was still racing, but she felt a surge of relief and pride. She had faced the confrontation without backing down, and she had done so with dignity. Over the following days, Nina continued to work on her hut, adding small touches that made it feel more like home. She built shelves for her herbs and tools, created a small garden patch near the creek, and cleared paths through the grass to make movement easier. Each task was a reminder that she was no longer powerless, that she had the ability to shape her life and her surroundings. Tom continued to support her, offering guidance and encouragement. Together they planned how to protect the area, how to make it less visible to outsiders, and how to gather resources efficiently. Nina taught him about the plants she found in the hills, showing him which berries were safe to eat, which roots could be cooked, and which herbs could heal minor injuries. Tom, in turn, taught her how to handle tools and manage animals, strengthening her practical skills. As the weeks passed, Nina began to feel a sense of confidence she had never experienced before. She no longer saw herself as a victim cast out from the town. She saw herself as a builder, a survivor, and someone capable of shaping her own future. Each stone she laid, each branch she secured, and each plant she nurtured was a step toward reclaiming her life. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of red and orange, Nina and Tom sat by the fire, reflecting on the progress they had made. "You have built something remarkable," Tom said, his voice filled with admiration. "You have turned fear and loss into strength and hope." Nina smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. "I could not have done it without you," she said. "Your support has made all the difference." Tom shook his head. "No," he said. "You did this. I only helped. You have the courage, the knowledge, and the determination. That is what built this home." As the night grew darker, Nina gazed up at the stars. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from losing her old home to wandering alone, from facing fear to finding an ally, and from despair to hope. She realized that the confrontation with the settlers had been a test, a moment to prove to herself that she could stand firm and claim her place in the world. In the days that followed, Nina's confidence continued to grow. She began to move more freely around the land, tending to her garden, collecting herbs, and checking the streams for fresh water. She noticed subtle changes in the attitude of some townspeople. A few who had once looked at her with suspicion now nodded politely when they passed by the ranch. It was not a complete acceptance, but it was a sign that her courage and determination were being noticed. Tom continued to guide her, helping with practical matters and offering advice when needed. "You are doing more than building a hut," he said one day. "You are building your life, your future, and your independence. That is something few people manage to do." Nina felt a quiet sense of pride. She had come a long way from the days when she had no home, no safety, and no hope. Now she had a plan, a place to live, and someone who believed in her. She had faced fear and confrontation, and she had not only survived but had grown stronger because of it. One afternoon, as she worked on the final touches of the hut, Nina reflected on how much she had learned. She realized that courage was not about fighting or showing strength to others. It was about standing firm in the face of fear, making careful choices, and trusting in one's own abilities. She had learned to observe, plan, and act with purpose. She had learned that trust could be earned, and that kindness and support could make even the hardest challenges bearable. By the end of the week, the hut was complete. It was small but sturdy, simple but full of life. Nina had added shelves, created a small garden, and built paths that connected her home to the creek and the surrounding hills. She had turned a piece of wilderness into a safe and welcoming place, a testament to her skill, determination, and courage. As she sat outside, watching the sun dip below the hills, Nina felt a sense of peace and accomplishment. She had faced confrontation, stood her ground, and created a life that was truly her own. She knew that challenges would continue to come, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. Nina had come far, from being cast out and left with nothing, to building a home and claiming her place on the land. She had faced fear and opposition, but with courage, determination, and the support of a friend, she had turned her loss into a new beginning. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, she knew that she was ready for whatever the future held. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills, spilling light across Nina's newly built hut. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of true peace. The small home she had created from the ground up stood firmly on the hill, surrounded by the green grasses of the creek and the small garden she had planted. Each corner of the hut reflected her determination, her skill, and the courage she had summoned through so many challenges. Nina paused to take it all in, a quiet smile spreading across her face. She had built more than a shelter. She had built hope. Tom joined her as she inspected the hut. He carried a small basket of fresh bread and herbs, his face lighting up when he saw her standing proudly by the doorway. "You did it," he said simply, admiration in his voice. "Look at what you have built." Nina nodded, her eyes shining. "I never thought I could do this alone," she said softly. "But I have learned something important. I can survive, I can plan, and I can create a life worth living." Tom smiled. You've proven more than survival. You've built a home, and in doing so, you've built your future. That is a remarkable thing. The days that followed were filled with careful work, tending to the garden, strengthening the small fences, and maintaining the hut. Nina grew more confident with each passing day, knowing that she was capable of managing her life and her land. She also continued to explore the hills around the ranch, gathering herbs, checking the creek for fresh water, and learning to observe the land for changes in weather or potential danger. Her skills, both learned from experience and shared by Tom, had grown stronger, and with them her independence. Despite her confidence, Nina was mindful of the townspeople. Some still looked at her with suspicion when they passed by the ranch, but she no longer feared their judgment. Instead, she focused on her own work, letting her actions speak for her character. She knew that respect was earned through consistency, effort, and courage, and she was ready to show the world the strength she carried. One afternoon, while tending to her garden, Nina noticed a small group of townspeople walking toward her property. She paused, steadying herself. The last confrontation had taught her to remain calm, observe carefully, and act with thought. Tom appeared at her side, sensing her tension. "Remember," he said quietly, "courage is standing firm and true to yourself. You have every right to be here." The townspeople approached slowly, stopping at the edge of the garden. One of them, an older woman Nina recognized, stepped forward. She looked at Nina, her expression softer than before. "We've seen your work," the woman said. "We've watched how you care for this land, how you have built this home with your own hands." "It is admirable." Nina felt a flicker of surprise. She had not expected acknowledgement, much less respect. "Thank you," she said, keeping her voice calm and steady.
"I only want to live in peace," the woman nodded. "I understand."
"You have shown strength, skill, and patience. That is not something many could do." She turned to the others who murmured agreement. Slowly the group left, leaving Nina and Tom alone. Nina's heart lifted with quiet joy. For the first time, she sensed that her efforts had begun to earn the recognition she deserved. In the days that followed, more small signs of acceptance appeared. A neighbor passed by and offered fresh milk from her cows. Another townsperson nodded politely when she saw Nina working in the garden. It was not a complete change in attitude, but it was enough to show Nina that persistence, courage, and kindness could influence even those who had once doubted her. Meanwhile, Nina's garden began to flourish. Rows of vegetables grew under her careful hands, and the herbs she had planted spread in small, fragrant patches. She harvested berries from the nearby bushes and gathered water from the creek, learning to balance her needs with respect for the land. Each day brought new challenges, but also new rewards. Nina began to feel a deep connection to the land, a sense of harmony and belonging she had not known since her childhood. Tom continued to support her, but now their partnership had shifted. Nina had grown confident, able to manage her daily tasks and plan for the future. Tom offered guidance when necessary, but he increasingly stepped back, allowing Nina to take full responsibility for her life in her home. She welcomed this, feeling pride in her accomplishments and a renewed sense of independence. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Nina sat outside the hut, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The air was calm, filled with the gentle sounds of the creek and the rustling of the grass. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from losing her hut to wandering alone, from fear and uncertainty to courage and determination, and from despair to hope. She realized that each step she had taken, each challenge she had faced had taught her something valuable about resilience, patience, and the power of perseverance. Tom joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You've come a long way," he said gently. "You've taken a life that could have been full of fear and turned it into one full of hope and purpose." Nina smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. "I could not have done it without your help," she said. "But I have also learned that I am stronger than I knew. This land, this hut, and this garden, they are proof that I can face challenges and create something lasting." Tom nodded. "And you will continue to grow." You have the skills, the knowledge, and the courage to handle whatever comes next. This is only the beginning of a life that is truly yours." In the weeks that followed, Nina continued to expand her skills in her home. She built small shelves and storage spaces inside the hut, making it more comfortable and functional. She added a small fence to protect her garden from wild animals, and cleared a safe path to the creek for water collection. Each improvement brought a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. She also began to share her knowledge with others quietly. She taught Tom more about the plants and herbs in the hills, helping him discover useful remedies and foods. She even shared some tips with neighbors who were willing to listen, earning respect and slowly building relationships based on trust and cooperation. Nina realized that strength was not only about surviving, but also about contributing to the community and inspiring others through actions rather than words. One day, as she tended her garden, she noticed a child from the nearby town watching her from a distance. The child's curiosity reminded her of her own childhood, the wonder she had felt when exploring the hills and learning about the land. She waved, and the child hesitated, then smiled and waved back. Nina felt a sense of connection, realizing that her courage and determination could inspire others, even the youngest among them. As summer turned to autumn, Nina's life had transformed completely. She no longer felt the fear and uncertainty that had haunted her after losing her hut. She had a safe home, a flourishing garden, and a partner in Tom who supported and respected her. She had earned the quiet acknowledgement of some townspeople and had begun to see that persistence, patience, and courage could slowly change attitudes. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Nina and Tom sat outside the hut, sharing tea and watching the stars appear. Nina reflected on how far she had come, from being cast out and left with nothing to building a home, reclaiming her life, and earning recognition and respect. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment and peace. "I never thought I could be this happy again," Nina said softly. "I thought the world had taken everything from me." Tom smiled. "You have taken everything you have lost and turned it into something stronger. You have created a life worth living, and that is a victory beyond measure." Nina nodded, her eyes shining. "I have learned that courage is not just about facing danger. It is about standing firm, planning carefully, and trusting in yourself. I have learned that kindness and support from others can make even the hardest challenges possible to face. And most of all, I have learned that hope is always worth holding on to, no matter how dark things seem." As the night grew quiet, Nina felt a sense of completeness. She had survived loss, hardship, and fear, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Her home stood firm, her garden thrived, and her life had become a testament to resilience and courage. She had faced every obstacle with determination, never giving up. And now she had not only safety and security, but also the beginnings of a life filled with dignity and hope. Nina looked up at the stars, feeling gratitude and peace. She had been cast out and left with nothing, but she had fought back with patience, courage, and skill. She had rebuilt her home, earned respect, and created a life she could be proud of. The journey had been long and difficult, but she had proved that even in the face of loss, fear, and uncertainty, strength and hope could prevail. And so, under the quiet light of the stars, Nina's journey came full circle. She had been cast out, but she had returned, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a builder, and a woman who had reclaimed her life. Her hut was more than a shelter. It was a symbol of courage, determination, and the power of never giving up. And as she sat by the fire with Tom, sipping tea and watching the hills stretch into the distance, she knew that her future was bright, full of possibility, and entirely her own.